All right. So I'm Jennifer, and let me tell you just a little brief summary about me and what I do and who I am before I hop into talking about why yoga is so great when you're pregnant, pre and postnatally. I have been a yoga teacher for almost 30 years, and specializing in prenatal yoga since I was pregnant 23 years ago. And I when I was pregnant, I was already a yoga teacher. I had been a yoga teacher for 4 years, and I had been, doing dynamic yoga, and I went to take some prenatal yoga, and it was super gentle. And I just sat and did breathing the whole time. And I was like, what is this doing for me? I want to move my body. And so it took me on this whole journey of finding out that so little was known about pregnancy and movement and why it's so good and what we could actually do. Most people would say things like, oh, you have to be careful, you can't do inversions, you can't twist too much. And so there was a lot of fear around moving in pregnancy. And that actually still is, a factor today. A lot of people are worried that movement when you're pregnant, certain movements will, be bad for you. I travel a lot now. I used to. I was, actually away from home more than I was at home every year. And I did a lot of traveling to places like China and South America and Europe and sometimes Middle East. And there were so many things I found, so many different myths about moving when you're pregnant. And it was amazing to see that, there are cultures where people say when you're pregnant, you should not lift your arms up over your head, because you could have a miscarriage. And, there's so many different things about it. And so going to these places and educating people on the benefits and showing them the results has been kind of my life passion. And now I'm teaching online and doing yoga classes online, courses to teach people how to teach prenatal yoga, and also doing workshops like women's workshops talking about menstruation and menopause and preparing for pregnancy with yoga. So that's me in a nutshell. That's my passion, is working with women and women's bodies and teaching people why movement is so great, and especially yoga when you're pregnant. So, okay, let me jump in. So what is yoga? Yoga is originally from India, as you probably already know what yoga is. And it's a series of different positions and poses, and doing it when you're pregnant has incredible benefits. One of the things that yoga teaches us that other exercise doesn't necessarily give you is it teaches the connection to the breath. And this is huge because people really don't know how to breathe. It's funny that with COVID happening in the last few years, the breath has been so impacted, right? Like all over the world, people have been impacted in their breath. And yoga actually increases lung capacity, and it teaches us how to move and how to engage muscles while we're breathing. And so, you think, well, I don't need to learn how to breathe. I know how to breathe. But really, yoga is something that can connect us to the breath in a whole new way. And so when someone's going through labor, or someone's even just when they're pregnant and they're in fear, then the breath is one of the first things that's impacted. And that also has an effect on their nervous system. So when the breath gets impacted, then we start to have issues with the sympathetic nervous system. There's the fight or flight that kicks in, and it's all connected to the breath. So yoga is so great. We learn how to move and breathe and really connect to the breath. And as well, what that does is that teaches us how to stay in the moment and stay really present. And this is something I think is so overlooked in yoga. A lot of people think about yoga and they're like, oh, I'm doing downward dog, I'm doing triangle, I'm doing a pose, right? But really what we're doing is we're trying to learn how to stay in the moment. So connected to the breath and stay really present. And that takes practice. Most of the time we are not in the moment. Most of the time in our lives, in our everyday lives, we're thinking about what we're going to do next, what we just did, what's happening in the future, what's happening in the past. And it's really hard to be in the moment. And it's interesting because in labor, the people who know how to do that, who can stay with each breath, are able to really get through labor so much more easily. Because a lot of times when people are in labor, what they're doing is they're thinking about how bad it's going to get. They're thinking actually about how it's worse, right? A lot of people end up getting pain medication, not because of the amount of pain they're in the moment, but because they're thinking about how bad it's going to get. And just by having those thoughts of that, they're actually making the pain that they're having worse. So yoga is such an amazing tool to help us to learn how to stay with this breath in this moment, experience what you're actually feeling right now, and not what you're going to be feeling, right? And it can make labor seem shorter. It can make labor seem, less intense. And it can allow people to actually enjoy the experience of labor. And I know a lot of people hear that and they're like, enjoy labor? People don't enjoy labor, but you can. There's so many times during labor that you can enjoy it. And I know this. I've been a doula for a really long time. I've logged more than 10,000 hours as a doula. And so I've seen this in action, and I've seen people who are able to stay in the moment, and they're able to connect with their bodies. And as that contraction's coming down, they're thinking, oh, it feels so good to let this contraction go. Wow, it feels so good for this contraction to come down. And that is going to have a whole nother effect on the nervous system, right? What that's going to do is that's going to boost the endorphins. It's going to allow them to experience positive sensations in labor. And so, yes, there is a really intense times when they're having to breathe and just be in the moment and get that contractions coming up, and it's really intense. But then once it starts to come down, if they're connected to being in the moment, they can experience the pleasure of labor. And then at the end of the contraction, they can experience, oh, it feels so good. Wow, it's over. It feels so good to just let it go. Instead of thinking, what most people do is they think, oh my gosh, it's over. Another one's going to start in a minute, So their nervous system is in this state of fight or flight. And so the pain gets worse. So, those two things in and of themselves, I want everyone to do yoga just for that, right? But then there's more. It also teaches us, it has a big impact on the actual balance of the body and the position of the baby. When we are balancing the structures that support the uterus, right? The uterine ligaments, the muscles around the uterus, the muscles of the pelvis, the muscles of the torso, we're able to really have an impact on the position the baby gets into when she goes into labor. And the baby might not be in a great position when labor begins, but if you have a balanced ligaments and balanced musculature, and your body has the ability to make all the movements and adjustments that it needs to make in that moment, then even if the baby's not in a good position, they're going to get into a good position much more easily as those contractions move the baby into a good position. And so, so we spend a lot of time on that. And it's not even about labor. It's also about comfort and enjoying pregnancy, because if you are working with a body that is balanced, where the pelvis is in alignment, where the uterus is in a good position in the body, then the person's going to experience a lot less discomfort, a lot less back pain, which 70% of pregnant people have back pain in labor. And that can go away when you're doing yoga. It's not always going to. There are definitely factors that can, lead to back pain, past injuries, things like that. But it really does take it down quite a bit, a lot less discomfort, and the ability to enjoy the pregnancy and feel good in their body and feel strong in their body. This is one of the things that I really love about prenatal yoga is we're building strength. I mean, ask Margaret. I have pregnant people doing chaturangas and doing, push-ups so that they are strong, so that they have the stamina that they need to be able to go through 24, 48, 36 hours of labor if they need to, have been studies that show that prenatal yoga does actually shorten the time of labor, if you know, and it also creates more pleasurable birth experiences. So those kinds of things are real, and I've seen them firsthand for sure. What else? Oh, postpartum, right? It's not just about labor, it's also about what happens after they have a baby. And this is a time when, you know, you're moving into this whole new person that you become. You know, I mean, anyone who's had a baby could both tell you there's life before you had a baby, and then there's life after you had a baby. And they're like two different lives, right? So, you know, we have this, you know, this great opportunity when people are pregnant to help them to understand their body and learn to work with their body and actually physically improve their body, so that afterwards they're going to have a much easier recovery. They're going to be able to bounce back much more quickly. And I'm not talking about like putting on your size 2 jeans after you've just had a baby. I'm talking about physically having strength, having stamina, having less injury from birth, because birth can cause injury, as we know, right? So all of those things are really amazing reasons to do prenatal yoga. And I can tell you anecdotally that I have had a lot of doula clients who do yoga, and I've had them who don't. And the ones who do yoga, overall, I'm going to say, have much more positive birth experiences, shorter labors, less interventions. You know, it's not like you have to do yoga in order to have a good birth experience, but I think that it's, you know, there's things that are really, really beneficial. So I talked really fast, I'm sorry. Anyone have any questions for me? Or Margaret, do you want to add anything that I might have left out?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I unfortunately am experiencing heartburn, and also my wrists. Anytime like I do downward dog, my wrists get active, like they hurt.
Yeah.
But I'm also told like those sort of movements, the downward dog, excuse me, and any sort of like bending isn't very good for heartburn. So I'm wondering like what are my options when it comes to yoga?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you actually can do a lot of yoga without getting the heart below the hips. And so that's where it starts to impact, right? The heart goes below the hips and you start to get the acid reflux, and it can make heartburn worse. So, I mean, let me get on my mat and just kind of show you what I'm talking about. So if you want to do some kind of, you know, something where you're doing like a sun salutation and you want to make sure you're not having your heart below your hips, you can use blocks. So you can reach up, bend the knees, bring the hands down, and you can notice my heart is never going to go below my hips, right? I can bring a foot forward, another one back, move into a lunge, right? I can go into a child's pose instead of downward dog, and then at least I'm letting the belly hang down. I'm able to get the ligaments that connect the uterus to the lower back. I'm allowing them to stretch and to lengthen and therefore get into balance. So you can do an entire, you know, like sequence where your heart never goes below your hips. And then the other thing is, as much as you can do to open up this area. So bringing arms behind the back, doing cactus arms, reaching arms up over the head, all of those things are going to help create space in that area. And with wrist pain too, this is going to help because you're never having to put your weight on your wrists.
Okay.
You can use a ball. I have a ball somewhere, but it's not in here right now. You can use a ball and you can kind of lean over it this way so you are not on your wrist, or even a block, or you can use your fists and you can do things like cat-cow, which are going to give you a good good lengthening of those ligaments as well. One of the reasons that yoga is so effective is that most of the time when you're just kind of in your daily life and walking around, we're doing a lot of sitting, and sitting is really not great for the balance of the body. And so what we want to do is do things where we're forward bending, where we're forward folding, and you can do that without actually going all the way forward. So bringing the hands up onto a ball, having your fists on the ground, those kinds of things. And then maybe once in a while, when you're not having heartburn, if you have a moment, do a downward dog, because they're great for helping to release pelvic floor. The pelvic floor has weight on it all the time when you're pregnant. And so getting it off, doing those inversions are really good to get the weight off of the pelvic floor for just a moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Margaret, I can't hear you. Can anyone else?
Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Can you share with us, I remember you telling a story about someone that felt like they were only in labor for a few minutes because they were actually in labor for quite a few hours, but they were doing the rocking meditation. Could you just share a little bit about that?
I will love to. Let me show you first what I'm talking about, because Margaret's talking about. This is one of my absolute favorite things to teach pregnant people. I have a blanket here. I'm just going to elevate my hips a tiny bit and sit down with my feet on the mat and my hips slightly elevated. And this is a technique that I've used with so many people, and it can be really helpful in helping them to achieve that being in the moment connection with the breath that I was talking about. It also will bring on a state of relaxation. If you've ever seen people meditating and doing any kind of prostrations or moving meditations where they can do them for really, really long periods of time, and it's kind of amazing because they're almost in an altered state. They are in an altered state. This brings on that same kind of state if you practice it. So I tell my pregnant students, do this 5 minutes every day, just 5 minutes, and sometimes 10 as they start to get more proficient. And what ends up happening is that they are able to get into a really deep state of relaxation by doing this rocking meditation. And then when they're in labor, they automatically will start to go into it, and they can really, it has a really big impact on the ability to relax in labor as well, because they're so used to doing it because they practice it over and over. So this rocking meditation, you keep your back straight, you inhale, come all the way forward, and you exhale, and you come all the way back and slightly round the back. And you can do this sitting in a chair. You can also do it sitting on the floor. And you want to connect with your breath. So you want to bring the whole inhale to bring you forward and the whole exhale to bring you back. And you start to notice when you're doing this regularly that you're going to be able to achieve a much deeper state of relaxation each time you do it. And what happens is you end up losing time. I've had many of my students do this, and my doula clients do it, and I've watched them be able to just do this rocking. And because they're not doing a meditation where they're still or just laying down, that doesn't give the baby an opportunity to get into a good position or to work with the contractions. But when you're doing moving and meditation, you're actually giving the baby an opportunity, the head, to find a good position in the pelvis, to turn and rotate. And you're able to decrease and increase the opening of the pelvis as you're doing this to allow the baby to come down. So it's fantastic. I actually just last week, had a birth. She was in Australia, but I'm doing it remotely now. And she did the rocking. I did it with her. It was an induction. They were going to do a cesarean because her water had been broken and she wasn't contracting. And she she had practiced the rocking actually for a long time because she had taken my courses and was pregnant and a yoga teacher. And she did the rocking while I did a meditation for her because her cervix was at 0. It was completely closed. And they were talking about, we're going to have to do a cesarean. And so I said, give me an hour. So we did this rocking meditation and at the same time talked about getting her cervix to open. And she did this for an hour, got up, did a few lunges. Within an hour, her cervix was at 7 centimeters.
Wow. Wow.
This just happened. Yeah. So it can be really, really powerful. Now, she's a yoga teacher. She also practiced this a lot. So that, I mean, and that's the thing with yoga, why yoga is so special. It's not something that you learn to do it and then you can just do it. It's something that you build into your life and into a practice. And that is so important when you move into motherhood, right? When you need to set up patterns in motherhood, you have this whole new life that you're about to have, right? With baby. And if you have it, you know, set up, okay, this is a practice for me. I'm going to do yoga 15 minutes every day, right? Then that's going to help them so much with the integration into this new life. It helps with postpartum depression. It helps with, you know, the ability to get back in touch with them, right? Because right after you have a baby, all the attention is on the baby and not here anymore. So it helps them to get back to that. So that's the rocking.
Can you show us that from the side?
Yeah. Let me put this down just a little. I think my camera's a little too high. Okay. So hips are slightly elevated. And like I said, you can do this in a chair. Sometimes it's not comfortable for people to get all the way down on the ground, and that's okay. And then, so hands are on the knees. I'm going to inhale, bring the torso forward. And I'm going to keep going as long as I'm inhaling. So my breath is really going to guide this. And in the beginning, it's going to be faster because your breath is going to be more shallow. And as the breath gets deeper, it'll go a little bit deeper. So inhale, forward. My back is pretty straight. Exhale, coming back, and I'm rounding. Inhale, lengthening the spine, coming forward. Exhale, rounding.
It's kind of like cat-cow
Yeah,
in some ways.
cat-cow. And really, it's going to be individual too. So people are going to find their comfort as they do it more to see what's going to be more comfortable for them.
So another question, how does the yoga and the breath help with the abdominal muscles and prevention of the rectus abdominis?
The diastasis recti,
Yeah.
separation of the abdominal muscles. Well, in yoga, we do have a big focus on the core, right? So your core is your diaphragm on the top, your pelvic floor on the bottom, and everything in between. And when there is imbalance in those areas, you're gonna start to have more pulling on one area, right? So as the belly grows, it's normal. The abdominal muscles are supposed to separate a little bit. We're meant to have that happen, and it's okay. But we don't want it to happen too much. And if we can, and the work that we do with prenatal yoga, we do a lot of what I like to call hugging the baby in, which is exhaling and engaging the transverse abdominals and the obliques, which is kind of giving like a hug to your whole torso. And that helps to keep those muscles from getting too far apart. And it's more than that, though. I work a lot with pelvic floor physical therapists and people who really work with people who have bad cases of diastasis. And one of the things that they say is that when you don't have a lot of movement in the fascia, which is like the the connective tissue, all that connects muscle to muscle, bone, like everything that connects everything. When you don't have a lot of movement of the fascia, it's like gets really, when you're not doing movement, the fascia gets more dense, it gets more stuck. And so then the areas that, are getting pulled are going to get pulled apart more because the fascia is so stuck. When we do movement, all of the movement that we do along the torso, all the side bending, all the back bends, all the forward bends, everything, we're lubricating that connective tissue. We're allowing it to have more movement so that when these muscles get pulled apart, there's more movement throughout the whole fascial sheath, right? And so we're able to prevent it from getting really big. And we also are good in prenatal yoga about not doing things that encourage too much opening. Like we don't do really intense back bends because that's going to encourage more opening. We don't do really intense twisting because that's going to encourage more opening.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also, one of the things I really appreciate about this prenatal Vinyasa yoga is in your teaching is you have so much knowledge. You bring in your doula work, you bring in your, and one of the things I think, even coming from a nursing background, your pelvic floor understanding, I mean, I have so much better understanding now, and I've been a nurse for 21 years, so it just really shows. So kudos to you for all the things that you do know, and I just think it's just like a real, I mean, it's just, I mean, I just went through the course myself and really appreciate it, and I'm like so thankful that I can bring this to my clients because it's I think it's a, I mean, I come from a yoga background. I have hatha yoga. I didn't have the prenatal part of it. And this is this like everything was like, oh, wow, this makes so much sense. And I can explain much better about the pelvic floor and what's going on when you're breathing and why you want to breathe the way you breathe. And it opens up the pelvic floor, and this is what we want. And so I just really, really do appreciate everything you're doing and your knowledge and how you're just making it easier for women. I just think that's just cool in itself.
Well, thank you. Pelvic floor is a passion of mine. And it's a passion of mine, honestly, because of issues that I've had. I was I did Ashtanga yoga, which is a really intense kind of yoga, for a long time. And it created really a lot of tightness in my own pelvic floor. And I was like, wow, there's so much to know that we're never taught. I mean, we're not taught this stuff as women. And then we get older and all of a sudden we are having pelvic floor problems and we're not talking about it with people. So, people in their 20s don't understand that, when you get to your 50s and 60s, prolapse is happening for many, many people. I mean, the organs are going to drop down. It happens because of gravity, right? And it also happens because of things that we do every day in our societies and our lifestyles, all the sitting, all of the, injuries. And there's so much that we can do to prevent that. If we can tell people about good pelvic floor health from when they're younger, when they're pregnant, before they have babies, before they get into their 50s and have prolapse, and, we can really affect lifestyles of people for long periods of time. I mean, people just do not know when they're young. They just, you kind of take your pelvic floor for granted, like, oh, it's always going to be there. It's my pelvic floor. It's holding everything up. No, it doesn't.
If you even know it exists.
Right. Right. And then people think, oh, once you have a baby, you're supposed to have, leaking of fluid. You're supposed to, every time you sneeze or you cough, oh, yep, I had a baby. That's supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen. Right. And we can do things to prevent it, and we can do things to heal it. Once you get to a certain point of prolapse, you can't come back up, but you can come back up a little bit when it's not, all the way prolapsed. When I tell people who are in their 20s, yeah, people are walking around right now with a belt to hold their uterus in, because your uterus can actually come out of your body. They're like, what? And, I didn't know that. I was never taught any of that before. And so, and the things that we can do are so simple. They really are. They're not complicated, but we just don't know. And doctors don't know this stuff. This is the thing I've had so many obstetricians and, nurses and doctors come and take my courses, and they're like, I didn't know this. I didn't know how to teach pelvic floor exercises correctly. So, yeah, thank you for like enjoying that part of it. Cause sometimes I think it's just my passion and I'm, but.
Jen, can you share some of the workshop that's coming up, you're doing and that's coming up? I'm excited for you.
So I have this workshop coming up starting March 11th through the 13th. They are going to be recorded so that you can get them afterwards, but coming to them is really great because you can actually interact. And there are 3 workshops. The first one is on preparing the body for pregnancy using yoga. And when I say using yoga, it's not all yoga positions. I'm talking about like all the things you can do mentally and physically to help prepare your body for pregnancy. That includes pelvic floor. That includes making sure the abdominal muscles are in a good place, and also the mental aspects of that as well. And then the second one is all about the menstrual cycle. So, working with not just the days of bleeding, the menstrual cycle, but the whole cycle, like our entire menstrual cycle. And people don't understand that your menstrual cycle changes really often, but there's also things that are consistent. Like the time of ovulation is a time when you actually have access to more creativity in your life. You have specific hormones that are being released that actually are creative, inspiring things. There are different, learning your cycle and learning your own body and tracking it as it changes over time can be so powerful for people. I talk about menstrual cramps, how to deal with menstrual cramps, and definitely yoga positions that you can do, at different times in your cycle for, to help your body have more optimal experience. And then the third one, this is the one I'm really excited about, actually.
I am too.
Because it's personal for me too, but it's menopause. It's about menopause and using yoga to help with the symptoms of menopause, to help enjoy menopause. People are like, enjoy menopause, like enjoying labor, right? But really, it's true. There are so many things that if you're able to tap into them, that can actually feel really good in menopause. And we have, the hormones that the pituitary gland releases, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, and those get on overdrive sometimes. As estrogen begins to decrease, those hormones are like, pumping out, trying to get the estrogen. It's like this tug of war, right? And then when you're actually in menopause, those hormones stay at really high levels. So it's like our body goes from creating on the inside, like creating life, to creating on the outside and being able to bring all the wisdom and all the knowledge that you have in your life into the world. And it's if you can tap into that and understand that, it can be such an amazing time. So, so there's so much with menopause. I'm also having a Chinese medicine doctor come for about 20 minutes and talk about different things that you can do using Chinese medicine pressure points and like seeds for the ears and things like that to help with symptoms. So I'm excited about that.
Wow.
So that's coming up. And I'll put in the chat a link to it if anyone's interested or if you want to know more.
Yeah, put in the link.
Yeah.
So I'm also here just to answer any questions that you might have about any of this stuff yeah, Sherry.
I'm curious as to what changed when you started doing this via Zoom rather than in person, did the adaptations and the response of the pregnant mother change because there was not a physical presence of yourself there?
Yeah, it's rough. It's much harder. It's way easier for me to be there and just, no,
Yeah.
but actually there's some really great things about it too. I think that if you have more prep, are you talking about like doing doula work remotely?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I think because you know you're not going to be there, there's a lot more preparation that you can ask for people to do. And a lot of times when people know they're going to have a doula, they're like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about that. My doula will help me with that, right? But if you say, okay, I'm going to be here for 6 hours total, so I'm going to come and go, you're not going to be there the entire time. I ended up still not sleeping for 2 days, but then they actually do the work, right?
Okay.
And
more responsible unto themselves.
right, exactly. And that's so powerful because that's something they'll take with them afterwards.
Right. Thank you.
And it's also hard. I mean, especially, I'm here. There's no way I'm going to go to Australia and find her hospital and show up there no matter what, so it's challenging to not actually be hands-on and be there and be able to do the massage. And it's also good to get the partner more enrolled too, because you can ahead of time, you can have the practice massage techniques and practice, things that they might not do as much because they're thinking, oh, my doula will do that for me.
And logistically, you have to work with the hospital in whatever country to be allowed to be even visually there via Zoom, right? I mean,
yeah, but most people you can just have earpod, they can just talk to you on, right?
All right. Okay. We find a way.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Anyone else have any questions for me?
I have a question a little bit about the doula position, because of the way things are here. I'm kind of mentally preparing myself for not having a doula present at my birth. Sorry about background noise. I'm having construction happening. But I'm wondering, like, for postpartum doula, like, what sort of roles would I ask my doula to be doing postpartum?
It depends on who the doula is and what kind of specialty they have, right? So if you have someone who's lactation consultant, you're going to be doing a lot of, work with breastfeeding and making sure that you're comfortable, making sure that you have, you're getting the specific amount of wet diapers every hour, like all of the things that they will do. They can also help you, like when I work with people, it's more about having them take the 5 minutes that they can to like do some meditation, do some grounding, do some movement. When you first have a baby at home, you're going to notice, baby here, right, that you're in a specific position a lot. Whether you're breastfeeding or not, you're going to be in this position. And it's kind of like, the position that we all end up having because of our cell phones, right? Where we're always like this. And so you're going to notice a lot more tension in your upper back, neck, and shoulders. There are things that you can do that they can lead you through, like different neck stretches, different, things to actually get you back in touch with your body. They're able to help with, to suggest things like if you're having perineal pain, and you've talked to the doctor about it and they say, yes, it's normal, they can suggest things like sitz baths and, just, it's hard to know exactly what's going to come up afterwards. So working with postpartum doula who is kind of understands what to expect afterwards and can help you with that. Yeah, Sherry.
Is there any kind of gentle yoga movements that you can do with your baby, for the baby? I mean, move its little arms and legs or?
Totally, yeah. Abdominal massage, like the little circular clockwise circles.
Right.
You can do things with the legs, like moving the legs, up this way, right? To help stimulate the bowels, help with gas, right? Most of the time when I do yoga with people, though, I don't have their babies with them, mostly just because, there's so much attention on the babies, and yoga really is about getting back to feeling your body again and seeing what it is that you need and nurturing this beautiful vessel that like grew this baby, right? And giving it some love and attention.
Yeah, self-care. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nice.
I was interested in what you were saying at the beginning about, the breath work and presence and stuff. And Margaret knows I just did a presentation at our Leads Club today about polyvagal theory, which is like, that is the basis of, breath work. And it's like how our autonomic nervous system works to calm us and bring us into those, that state of presence where we feel safe. And it's so cool. So interesting. And it's like the central piece that has been missing, because things like meditation and yoga and how singing makes us feel so good, and all these other things are like, yeah, we know they're true. We kind of feel they're true. They're in these different, philosophies and things like that, but we don't know exactly why. So like some people are going to roll their eyes because like my husband, will roll his eyes at anything that hasn't been proven scientifically, and it's like, it's the thing. It's the missing thing.
Yeah. I mean, look, we now know why when you have a gut feeling, it's actually because the vagus nerve goes down into the gut, and we know now that there's actually these connections when we can prove. And yeah, it's fascinating. So fascinating.
Yeah. I'm just talking about it to everybody I can. Everybody I meet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really, I talk a lot in my courses about focusing on the things that feel good, and when we do that for prolonged periods of time, that actually changes the neural pathways in our brains, right?
Yeah.
And so this is like one of the bases for a lot of the things that I talk about is we have an opportunity to kind of reprogram our brains and to feel better in our lives in the world. I mean, really, I bring this into the pregnancy realm because those are the people who are actually going to do the work, because they have this impending event, right?
Yeah. You got a deadline.
I mean, Rose, right? Because like if you know that you have this thing, and so you're like doing things that you might not have done otherwise because, right? So it's like a time when we have access. It's this transformational time when people can reinvent themselves, when they can bring some of these things into their lives. And I think this is one of the things that I love about working with pregnancy, is seeing this, having the ability for people to actually do the work that we're asking them to do, because they know it's going to be helpful and it's going to have an impact. And so, what we can actually change people's brains. COVID has really messed with us as globally, right? People have been in states of negativity, and you might notice that a lot of people will go more to the negative now when they're talking, like thinking about all the things that are wrong instead of thinking about things that are good. Like, look, we're coming out of this. Look, we're able to, not wear masks. Look, we're able to, and instead of focusing on the positive, it's still, these neural pathways, the negative neural pathways have gotten so well used, like a freeway, versus a little road through the woods, right? So we've used those neural pathways, those negative ones, so much that they're dominant, and they're going to pop to the front as soon as they're allowed to, if we're just on our daily thinking what our normal thoughts are. So we actually have to practice having positive thoughts. And that is really hard right now for people. Like even just sitting there and doing it for a moment, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable because those neural pathways have been so well used, the negative ones, that it's actually uncomfortable to have positive thoughts. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So if we can, what I like to do is I like to use yoga and movement. So I'll be like, open up your chest and just take a moment and see how good it feels. And just let that moment stay there for an entire minute. Just breathe every breath. It feels so good to open your chest, right? And that's how we're going to start to actually create more of these things. And that's how, when you practice, that's how in labor, people are able to then, feel the things that feel good in labor. Because people right now, with all this negativity and all these negative neural pathways that are getting so well used, they're going to go into labor and they're going to be like, I can't do this. I can't do this. There's no way I can do it. Right. And, because that's what they're used to. Those are so well used. So if we can start to get people to really focus on the things that feel good, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day. Right?
Hey, Jen, one of the things that during our class that we started to do was the no complaint. Can you share a little about that?
COVID is a really hard time to do this. So I've been teaching this all through COVID, right? And I can tell you that pre-COVID, people did this exercise all the time. During COVID, my classes are not doing it. They're not doing it because it's so uncomfortable to not be able to complain. So what this is, what Margaret's talking about is there's this book called A Complaint-Free World. And I was introduced to it by a friend a yoga teacher who was doing it. And I was thinking, oh, it's kind of cool. You go 21 days without complaining. That's interesting. I wonder what that will do. But I was like, but I'm a yoga teacher. I don't need that. I don't complain much, right? So I had this experience where I was going to China and it was like everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I was exhausted. I hadn't slept for days and I had to start a training with like 65 people and I hadn't slept and I was so tired and all I wanted to do was complain. And I thought, wait a second, this is exactly what I need right now. So instead of complaining, I had this moment of, it's going to feel so good when the sun comes out. And I had this moment where I could feel the sun on my face. And, I was able to access this positive feeling in the midst of all of this chaos. And I thought, is there something to this? So anyway, what you do is you try not to complain for 21 days. You wear a bracelet. And every time you complain, you put the bracelet on the other wrist. And at first you're complaining a lot in your head, but you're not allowed to actually verbalize it. And so it's really difficult. And you notice everyone around you and how much they're complaining. But then after a while, you start to realize that you don't really need to complain. Some of the things that you're complaining about really are not that important. And you start to focus on the things that are good in your life because you have to, right? And you start to focus on the things that you can do about a situation. If you're uncomfortable, what can I do right now? Okay, I have a headache. I'm not going to complain about it. Instead, what am I going to do to make this go away? I'm going to put some ice on my head. It's going to feel so good. Okay, I'm going to do that, right? And when you're not constantly saying, oh, my head hurts, then you end up actually doing something about it. You end up actually not having as bad an experience as you would have if you were complaining about it continuously. So it's really interesting and really difficult, really difficult. I can tell you, I've gone 7 days or 11 days without complaining one time. That's the longest I've ever gone without having to change your bracelet. Because a complaint could even be just that's a complaint. So
that's accountable.
Right. But the thing is, it's not about the goal of doing it for 21 days. It's really about the experience of it and how it changes you. And I can tell you that my life, when I'm actually practicing this, gets so much better. So.
Nice. Nice.
Go ahead, Tina. Sorry. Did you have something?
I was just gonna say, okay, I've written that down.
I'm actually gonna put, there's an audio book and it's only 4 hours long and you can listen to it and it's fascinating. It'll tell you exactly how to do all of this stuff. I mean, to do the complaint-free challenge.
Nice. Yeah, we definitely need some powerful healing. That's accessible to everybody.
So Margaret, what I was talking about is that, you know, as great as the complaint-free world is, if you can do it, totally try it because it's really amazing. But what I'm finding is that because we're all living this global trauma together, that it's actually working better to just give yourself 5-10 minutes a day where you're focusing on what feels good. And I find it's easy to do if you're doing a yoga practice because you can take that time and you can include movement in it, and movement where you're opening up your heart and you're like, oh, it feels so good just to do this. And maybe just doing a movement, and it might not even be the movement that's prescribed. It may just be any movement that you're doing. You can kind of go off on your own and do, you know, something feels good. You just kind of, and just think about while you're doing it, oh, this feels so good. And if you can prolong the time that you're having those positive feelings, you're really going to make a difference in your ability to be able to perceive positive sensations.
I had a question on the no complaint thing versus like, okay, so what about the whole suppressing your feelings?
So the thing is, it's not about that this is a way to live. It's an exercise that is meant to reprogram your brain. And then when you're done with it, you go back to living your life. I don't want you to be a victim to that. Like, that's not what it's about. It's about, you know, trying this as an exercise to shift how much you end up complaining for reasons that you don't need to. So it's kind of like a self-observation, right?
I just have one more thing to ask you is about wall squats and just the importance of squatting and how that can really change a woman's labor.
So the wall squats are something that I do in a prenatal yoga class. And I have someone holding a block between their legs. Let me show you. Leaning against the wall, holding a block between the thighs, and then bending the knees and squatting down and holding this. And we end up holding it for about a minute. And while you're holding it, we're doing different kinds of relaxation techniques. So sometimes we'll do visualization. Sometimes we'll do things like sighing, like, ah. So we're learning how, with muscles engaged, to find relaxation and see what's going to work well for people. So when we're doing them, when I'm teaching them, we're doing them several different kinds of methods because everyone's different. So what I teach in my doula trainings and my hypnosis trainings are about finding like what's going to work for different people and helping them find that. So some people are going to respond really well to visualization, but some people aren't. Like, I'm not a visual person at all. I'm really kinesthetic. So for me, I need either touch or I need to imagine a feeling. And that's really going to work for me. You can tell me as you exhale, feel it feels so good to just relax, and I will feel that. Whereas someone else might be really visual, and they might say, imagine a blue light moving down your body, relaxing you more and more, and that will work for them. Or someone will, a sound, auditory, or using the voice. People are going to respond differently to different things. So that's, why I don't really do hypnobirthing because that's all about just kind of laying down and doing a meditation. And instead what I do is having people to have different methods of how they can relax. I'm sorry, I'm not really saying that well, but yeah.
So when the squatting is done for a minute and then they come up and you can set it just before they come up from that squat, you can have them relax and just say, feel how good the relaxation is. Come on up and do some movement with some relaxation. And you can say, you know what, you just went through a minute of squatting. And that is what an average contraction is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
So,
and then people in labor who in practicing that, they'll think about that. They'll think, okay, it's just like the wall squats. I can get through this minute, right?
huh.
Thank you so much for coming and spending time with us. And I really do appreciate it. And Rose is outside.
No, I'm inside.
You're inside. It looked like you're outside.
But I did have a question. Oh yeah, I got a lot of trees and whatnot around me. But I wanted to know your rates for your classes and one-on-one type of stuff and your doula service.
Let me give you, I'm just going to put my website in here. It has all the information.
Perfect. Great.
Mm-hmm.
And I will put a link to my courses too. And
why is it called the dolphin method?
well, you know, hold on one second. I'll tell you. Okay. There's also, Rose, in case you want to know, or anybody wants to know, in that second link I gave, I do have a free 30-minute pelvic floor video that you can watch. It's part of my teacher training, but it's also, I put it out for free, and it's basically signs and symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction. So if anyone wants to watch it, that's free. Okay. So, and there's also, which is not on here, there's a bundle. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to put this up. If you want to take all 3 workshops. Okay. What was I saying?
Why the dolphin method?
Oh, the dolphin method, yes. So in 2002, I opened up my first yoga studio, and it was all prenatal yoga, postnatal yoga, and doula services. And I needed a name for it, and I could not think of a name for it. And I was like going crazy. And so one day I'm in the shower, I get all my inspiration in the shower. If I ever need inspiration, I just get in the shower. And I like had this moment of everything kind of went fuzzy, and I saw 3 dolphins like in a circle. And
Nice.
so I thought dolphin yoga and doula center. Yes. So that's how it happened. But then I went and started researching, like, okay, what's this whole thing with dolphins? Why would I choose dolphins? Because I knew people were going to ask me. And so dolphins are actually like nature's midwives. So when there is a pregnant dolphin, all the female dolphins of the school pack, I don't know. Yeah. They all gather around the female dolphin, and they help them give birth. And they say that they emit sounds for the pain, and they like actually help the dolphins give birth. And if a pregnant woman, human woman, gets into water with dolphins, they will also find the woman and like people now deliver with dolphins sometimes. So, yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting that that ended up happening.
Yeah.
So the shower is the real reason, but then and the whole midwife thing, nature's midwives.
Nice.
Perfect.
So it was so great to meet you all. And please, if you have ever need anything, or Rose, if you have any questions, I'm happy to hop on Zoom and chat anytime. So
Awesome. Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for coming. Our next Birth Cafe is 4/4 at 4. And and we do have a special speaker then too, so it'll be cool. So
Nice.
thank you.
And thanks for the reminder about it all.
Yeah, I was like, do I text her or not text her? I wasn't sure, so I said, oh, just go for it.
Yes, thank you, thank you. That's always really helpful. So I'll try. I'll put it in my calendar for 4/4 at 4. But I still I was really appreciative of the reminder.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you, thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice seeing you again.